Good morning, everyone. It's Hansula Kang, State Superintendent. It's so nice to be here with you all for our virtual all-hands meeting for July. I want to thank you all for your patience as we are learning how to best hold our all-hands meetings in a virtual setting. I wish we could all be together, but I'm still really glad to be able to spend this time with you all this morning and look forward to continuing these all-hands meetings on a monthly basis, just so that we can stay in touch more regularly as we're all in a remote posture. Before we start on today's agenda, I just wanted to take a moment to share some sad news about our team. We have lost several team members who have passed away in the last several months, and I know there are a number of other folks who have lost family members or loved ones during this time. As some of you know, when this has happened in the past, we've taken a moment of silence in our in-person all-hands meetings to honor the memory of those we have lost. And so while I know this is a heavy note to begin on, I wanted to ask that you all, since we're not going to be in person for a while, that we take a moment on this virtual all-hands meeting to honor the memory of those we've lost. And so I'm going to share their names here. In recent months, we've lost 4 members of our Division of Student Transportation. Mr. David Hughes, who served as a bus attendant at our New York Avenue terminal. Mr. Gene Sineda, who was a motor vehicle operator at our Adams Place terminal. Mr. Jerome Thorpe, who served as a bus attendant at our 5th Street terminal. And Ms. Farzana Khan, who was a motor vehicle operator at our Adams Place terminal. And again, I know there are a number of folks from multiple teams who've lost family members or loved ones during this time as well. So please join me in a moment of silence wherever you are to honor the service and the memory of the team members we've lost and those others who are grieving right now. Thank you all for joining me in that moment of silence. I also want to note for anybody who has experienced a loss or for anyone who needs support during these very challenging times, we have many services available through our employee assistance program, including confidential counseling that is available. And so I want to encourage anyone who is looking for support to reach out. The partner for our employee assistance program is called Innova, and we've shared that information before in the OSSI Wire. We'll continue to do that, and I think we're going to try and drop that link into the chat right now as well. So I know that was, like I said, a heavy note to begin on, but we did want to take a moment to share that news and to just honor our team members. And so with that, I'm going to now transition into our the topics for today's time together. And so we'll, I think, hopefully you all are seeing the slides right now, and then we will go to some open Q&A at the end. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat throughout, and then we will answer as many questions as we can at the end. So on today's agenda, I wanted to share a high-level overview of our 2020 staff survey results, and also talk about how we are planning for a future return to work. I know folks have had a lot of questions and there's been just a lot of uncertainty out there. So I want to just start by reassuring you all that we're not expecting to return to work anytime soon. I hope that I'm sharing that in advance to hopefully ease your minds a little bit and allow us to spend a little bit of time on these staff survey results that are important every year, but also are particularly informing our planning efforts this year for what a future return to work will look like. So I'm excited to spend just a few minutes on those survey results, and then we'll talk more about that plan for a future return to work, to in-person work, when we get to that point in the agenda. Great. So I wanted to be sure to share an overview of our staff survey results with you, not only because the survey is, like I said, really important to inform our work. Those of you who've been here know that we take the survey very seriously every year. We carefully review the results and then think about what we can do to continue to improve our organizational culture and our work together. But it feels especially important and relevant this year because you might remember that there was a special section related to our response to the coronavirus. We wanted to be sure to hear from you all about how the move to remote work was going, whether how communications were working, and so on, and your ability to do your work, and any questions or concerns that you might have as well. And so wanted to share an overview with you. By way of general background, this is actually the 6th year that we have administered the survey, starting in 2015 all the way up through this past May. We take the results really seriously, and every year we reflect on the results and commit to a series of actions that we take on agency-wide, and then many divisions also think about any changes that they want to implement at the division level as well. And so I'm looking forward to sharing this high-level overview, and we will also share the results in the next OSSE Wire, and then we'll be coming back at a future all-hands meeting to talk more about the specific commitments we are making coming out of the survey. As a reminder from last year's survey, we implemented a number of steps, including additional opportunities for staff professional development and skill building, including starting our very first OSSE mentoring program that I think has been really exciting to see get off the ground, expanding supports for managers, including an expanded coaching program and a manager community of practice, launching our DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group, and planning on holding several new events to support goals around DEI, and then also expanding last year our 360-degree feedback process to our staff, to all of our staff for the first time, to help improve and ensure that we all had that feedback to reflect on. So that's an overview of what we did out of last year's results. This year, we can go to the next slide. I'm excited to share with you all some of the changes we've seen since last year. So you can see here visually, these are just the categories of the different questions on the survey. And you can see that we had some really exciting increases across almost every category. In particular, the only category where we stayed relatively flat was work environment, where we dipped by 1 point. But in every other category, we went up by as much as 4 to 7 points in terms of the percentage of our staff who responded to the survey and agreed or strongly agreed with the statements in each of the categories. A few of the notable things I'll flag are that 95% of survey respondents agree that OSSE is moving in the right direction, answered yes to that question, which is up from 85% in 2016 when we first asked that question. And then 87% of survey respondents agree or strongly agree that OSSE is improving outcomes for children and adults in DC. That's of course our ultimate goal, and so it's really exciting to see that people feel like that is happening. I also want to flag that the survey helps us on a number of more micro issues as well. 83% of people now agree or strongly agree that I have a good understanding of structures and processes at OSSE. And that's up 12 points from last year, and which was up 5 points from the year before that. So this is one of those things where if you don't know how to get things done within an organization, that can be very frustrating. It can cause a lot of daily sort of internal frustration. So it's really exciting to see that the work we've been doing to try and clarify how things work, how decisions are made, where to find information is starting to be felt by our team. And then we were excited to see notable increases for the career path and the diversity, equity, and inclusion categories that you can see in the bottom right of the slide, but those remain our 2 lowest categories, and so that's certainly an area of focus for going forward. You can go to the next slide now, and this slide is about the specific coronavirus section, and again, this is one reason why we wanted to be sure to spend a little bit of time in today's meeting talking about these results. It was really exciting to see that generally our team, all of you, have felt like the move to remote work during the COVID-19 response has actually gone quite smoothly. The vast majority of people have agreed or strongly agreed that they've felt informed and kept up to date, that they feel confident in our response, they have the resources they need, and really good information about opportunities to engage or check in with their manager and engage or check in with colleagues. So more than 90% of our team said they agreed or strongly agreed that they have those regular opportunities to stay connected, which is really important. And of course, Microsoft Teams has been incredibly helpful as a platform for that, as well as other ways that we are staying connected. So it was exciting to see these responses. At the same time, I think there were a couple of things that really showed up in the comments. One of the trends in the comments were, we've seen this in the past as well, but people really have enjoyed telework and have asked us to consider how we might keep the lessons learned from this time and keep some of those things going, and even consider expanding telework options in the future. Again, I'll be talking more about what our posture is going to be for the foreseeable future in just a minute, but I think that feedback is also certainly heard and understood. And then we also heard a number of questions that folks have felt like this time of working from home has worked really well, but had many questions about when we might return to in-person operations and what steps and protections might be in place at that point, which have really helped inform our planning for this next section of the agenda. So I want to assure you that everything you all shared in the survey we're carefully reviewing it. Each division has had their results, and so hopefully you've been participating in or will be soon participating in conversations about your own division specific results as well as the agency ones. And we look forward, as I said, to coming back to you in a future meeting with some ideas around specific commitments we will make coming out of this year's survey. So we know that there's still areas for improvement and more work to do, but it was really exciting to see the how positively our team feels generally, not only about the coronavirus response, but also about our overall work as a state education agency, even during such a challenging time. Some of you who were here last year might remember that last summer our results were actually pretty flat from the year before. We didn't go down. In most areas we generally maintained the gains we've made. We did see a little bit of a dip last year in mission and goals, and a lot of people said we had a brand new strategic plan and a lot of questions from folks about what does this new plan mean for my work. And a year into that plan, despite everything else that has changed in our world, it was really exciting to me to see just how positively our team feels, just how much people have come to feel like they do understand our strategic pillars, our mission, and our goals, and in many ways feel more connected to that work than ever during this time because we see the impact we are having on our students, our families, and our community. So I want to thank you all for participating in the survey, and thank you deeply for the work that you've been doing and how that's coming together. So with that, we can go to the next slide. I'm going to keep going because I know folks are eager to hear about the next section, but if you do have questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. And again, we will get to as many of those questions as we can at the end today. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about planning for a future return to in-person work. And we'll share a little bit of an overview and then talk about what planning is underway. Before I jump in, I just want to share a few overview thoughts. So again, I want to reassure you that we are not planning to return to work in person for quite some time. I am in the office today just because I wanted to make sure I had a steady internet connection and a quiet place for this broadcast. But generally, we are all continuing to work remotely, except for a very few limited exceptions. And so, as you know, we've been in this telework posture since mid-March, and the city has laid out different phases based on what the public health data looks like for what kinds of in-person operations and interactions can be taking place. We are currently, as a city, in the middle of what's called phase 2, and it's been determined that we will not be returning to work in person during phase 2, which is the phase we're currently in, nor during phase 3. We don't know when phase 3 will start, but we know that even once it does start, OSSU staff will not be returning to work during that time, again, except for a couple of very small exceptions where we've already been in touch with those teams. Although we know it will be a few months before we return to work, the city as a whole and our own team have been planning for what an eventual future return to in-person work would look like. We're being really thoughtful and planful with templates and rubrics. We are absolutely considering all of the big questions you all have been asking about. What does this look like for people in different individual circumstances? What does it look like for specific family obligations? What does it look like in terms of travel and commuting and, of course, overall health and safety? And so we're carefully considering all of those questions. I want to be candid with you that we don't have all of the answers yet because this is a new world for all of us, but we do have some, and I'm excited to share those with you today, and I'm excited to share with you the process we are going to use to continue working through the questions that are coming up and how we will make sure we get to answers before we return to in-person work. I also just want to say, actually, if we could go back one slide, I also just want to say that before I get into the details, I want to make sure you hear directly from me that I care and we all care deeply about each and every one of you. Your health and safety, your ensuring that you are able to have what you need is deeply important to all of us. And so that we care deeply about you, and your health and safety are top of mind for all of us as we are going through this planning and all the different questions that we have. So just want you to know that I care and we all care deeply about you, and we will stay aware of all of that. So again, I'm excited to share with you what we do know, and we will stay in touch with you transparently and clearly as we move forward as well. So now we can go to the next slide. So a few updates first from the district. So as I noted, the district is currently in phase 2 of reopening. So there have been some more businesses that have opened, some more types of activities, but the mayor certainly urged all of us to remain cautious and to be thoughtful and careful. And in fact, there have been a few new steps put in place in recent weeks that I will talk about in just a minute. And again, the phases are determined by public health data. So we're not able to give a date certain when we would move to the next phase. It's dependent on a number of different health metrics and what DC Health shares with all of us. In terms of steps taken recently, the mayor has extended the date of our public health emergency until October 9th. It's been extended in the past, and this was the most recent update to the date. And she also has issued new orders on masks and travel that we wanted to make sure everyone on our team is aware of. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about those on the next couple of slides. And then, of course, as I said, we remain in a telework posture with just a couple of limited exceptions. For example, this week, actually, our GED testing office, which is located at 441 4th Street, reopened with limited hours and with a lot of special measures in place. So we installed plexiglass, and only a limited number of people are allowed in at a time, but that we reopened the GED testing service in order to allow residents to participate in GED testing again, which they had not been able to do for a while, and it's still in sort of a modified posture. So again, when there are very limited circumstances where in-person operations might be necessary, we're in touch directly with those teams to talk about them, but for OSSE overall, we will remain in a telework posture for all of phase 2 and phase 3. I want to also note that we expect to hear more about school schedules, including the DCPS schedule in particular, from Mayor Bowser by no later than tomorrow. We may actually, if we have an update before then, we will share that as well. We know that neighboring jurisdictions, including Prince George's County and Montgomery County and Arlington, have made announcements about their decisions to extend distance learning for different periods of time. And so again, when we know more about the DC school schedules, we will share them with you. On the next slide, I just wanted to take a minute again to talk about some of these citywide mayor's orders that have been issued, just so you all are aware. So one recent order from the mayor was an update to the order around masks. So specifically, it says that when you are outside of your home, you must wear a mask unless one of these specific exceptions applies. So if you're a child 2 or younger, if you're vigorously exercising outdoors and not close to anyone, if you're actively eating or drinking, or if you're in an enclosed office and alone. So right now I'm sitting in an enclosed office by myself, so I've taken my mask off, but as soon as I leave this office, when I'm walking through our hallways, I will have my mask on, and certainly when I'm outside and so on, I will have my mask on. So that was a recent mayor's order issued last week. And then the next slide is another order that the mayor issued around non-essential travel. And so beginning on Monday, July 27th, the mayor has shared that anyone coming into DC from a high-risk area, meaning other parts of the country or internationally, who is not traveling for essential activities needs to self-quarantine for 14 days. So self-quarantine during that time. The order specifically excludes Maryland and Virginia, so no concerns about traveling back and forth there, but DC Health has published a list of high-risk areas that is on the coronavirus.dc.gov website, and they will update that list of high-risk areas every 2 weeks. So if someone were to come to DC from one of those areas, they would need to self-quarantine for 14 days. So those are a few of the overall citywide updates. And now on the next slide, I will talk a little bit about how we are planning for an eventual return to in-person work at OSSE. So the big areas we are focused on are, number one, health and safety. As I said, the health and safety of our staff is first and foremost on our minds. The second area we're considering is communication and training, so steps we need to take in that area. And then the third area is facilities planning. As I mentioned, for our GED office, we actually worked to install some plexiglass as separators. We will plan carefully around all of our facilities and what any particular needs are. In order to do this planning along these three dimensions, we have formed what we are calling an Agency Reopen Team, or ART. And this team, this committee, is made up of representatives from our HR team, from operations, the Division of Student Transportation, Division of Early Learning, and post-secondary and career education. And they are working together as a group on plans for a future return to in-person work for all 9 of OSSE's locations. So those of you who have been through new hire orientation anytime in the last few years know that we have 9 different locations. Of course, our Big 1050 office, but also our terminals, our Strong Start office, the GED office, the Sumner Museum, and a couple of others as well. And so the team is developing an agency-specific return to work guide for all of our different locations that takes into account the general DC guidance, but tailors it to our specific needs and operations. And so we are developing that, and we'll certainly share it with you all when it is ready. The big questions we are considering as we are developing those plans are listed here on this slide. So we're thinking about things like what work has to happen within our buildings versus work that can happen remotely. How can we limit the number of people in the building across floors and ensure that we have appropriate social distance between workstations? What procedures have to be in place so that we can document that everyone who reports to work is well. So how do we screen and ensure that we know and can document that everyone is well? How do we reduce exposure by reducing the number of common areas? And then what PPE and cleaning supplies will be necessary to support an organization of our size? We know there are many other questions as well, but these are some of the big ones that we are considering. And then on the next slide, I can share with you, as I noted, we don't have all of the answers, but I do want to share with you what we know at this point. So I want to reiterate again that OSSE main staff will not return to work during phase 2 or during phase 3. When we do return to work, we will ensure we have social distancing and the supplies that we need. So we will be providing face masks for all of our staff, hand sanitizer, etc. And then our DOT team, where the nature of the work is quite different, will have additional precautions and procedures in place. Our terminals have not been operating. We've not been transporting students since mid-March, when our schools first went to remote learning and we all went to a remote posture. Some of our staff have been teleworking, some of our DOT staff have been teleworking, and others have been involved with some of the emergency relief efforts around the city, but we've not been transporting students since mid-March. If and when schools return to in-person operations, our DOT team would also return to in-person operations, and they've been preparing for that time. And given the nature of their work, they have some additional precautions and procedures in place. So PPE will be provided for all of our DOT staff, but it will include not just face masks, but also face shields and gloves as well. We've also made some modifications to specific procedures at the terminals to limit contact, and we have specific supplies and procedures also to clean and disinfect our buses at the end of each tour, and we've actually even purchased some additional what's called electrostatic machines to have an additional level of disinfecting. So these are some of the things we know at this point. I know people will have a number of questions, and we will do our very best to answer them. And where we don't have answers yet, we are tracking on all of the different questions, and we'll continue to keep you all informed as transparently and clearly and timely as we can. And we will make sure that we are sharing written guidance with you all before we return to work in person. So I want to thank you all for your understanding, for your good questions, for helping us ensure that we are being planful and thoughtful in all of this work. And I just want to say again how much we care about each and every one of you and how seriously we are taking the need to plan thoughtfully and to keep in mind the different individual circumstances that we all may be in, while we also all stay focused on continuing with the important work that we do on behalf of our students and families. And so again, we will continue to communicate transparently with you through these monthly all hands meetings as well as email communications. And I want you to know that we are going to get through this together as a team and as a community. So with that, Lita, let's go ahead and open it up for Q&A. And yeah, we can do some Q&A based on questions that were submitted before and or today during the chat.
Great. Hello, and hello, everybody out there. So we're just going to start with some questions that we had from the June All Hands that we didn't get a chance to answer. So I'll ask those of you, Hansul, and you can provide some answers, and then we'll move to Q&A in the chat area. So first question, will there be a staggered return to work?
Yes, this is a great question, and the answer is yes. When we return to work, when we return to in-person work, I should say, because obviously we are all still working, but when we return to in-person work, staff will be staggered at all of our locations because we want to ensure that proper social distancing and safety measures are in place. So we will modify how we enter buildings and how we work within our assigned spaces, and we will have staggered schedules. And again, we're working through the details that will be included in our OSSE specific reopening guide that we will share with you all when it's finalized. But yes, the answer is that we will have some kind of staggered schedules.
Great. And you did go over this just a little bit, but I think it's safe to reiterate, what exactly will the DOT setup be? Yeah,
it's a great question. And so just for folks who are newer, DOT again stands for Division of Student Transportation, where we provide special education transportation services for our students with disabilities who need this accommodation as they go from home to school. So for general education students in DC and for students who don't have this specific accommodation, DC does not have school buses for all children. We provide instead free public transportation on Metro Bus and Metro Rail, but for students with disabilities who have this specific accommodation in their IEP, our Division of Student Transportation provides that bus service to and from school. And so we operate out of 4 different terminals with many hundreds of incredible motor vehicle operators and bus attendants who do an incredible job of working with our students and helping them with this essential function of getting to and from school. And so given how closely our staff work with students of many different age ranges and with many different needs, as young as age 3 and all the way on up, what we are doing is modifying some of the, expanding I should say rather, some of the PPE that we provide for staff. So for all staff at all locations, we will be providing face masks as well as hand sanitizer. For our DOT staff, we will provide face masks, but also face shields and gloves. And we will require mask use again per the mayor's order at all times. We will also have specific screening procedures that we'll use upon arrival at each terminal location, including potentially temperature checks and other areas. And then we've also modified sign in and sign out procedures. So we had just recently moved to biometric scanning with like a fingerprint, but we are now moving instead to limit touch to a mobile enabled device, so something you can use on your phone or card swipes as needed. We are modifying a number of our procedures to reduce contact at all of our terminal locations.
Great, and a follow-up to that question, Hansul, how will the buses at our terminals be cleaned?
Yeah, this is a great question. So we are going to make sure that we have cleaning supplies at all terminals for all of our buses. Our buses will be disinfected daily at the end of each tour, including wiping down frequently touched surfaces and seats. And again, we've also purchased electrostatic machines to provide an additional level of disinfecting on a regular basis on our buses. We would also use specialized cleaning vendors as needed if there ever were to be a confirmed case that took place with our buses.
Great, and next question on the returning back to in-person work. What if you are high risk? Do you have to come back? What if your family is high risk? What if you just simply don't feel comfortable coming back?
Yeah, I appreciate this question. And again, I just want to say first and foremost, your health and safety and that of your family is top of mind for all of us. And so DCHR has issued guidance to all HR advisors across the district. And so if you have concerns or questions about your return to work, we encourage you to reach out to HR confidentially to discuss your circumstances and to figure out what to do going forward. So please contact HR at a dedicated email address that we've set up. It's ossie.hrcovid@dc.gov to confidentially discuss your concerns. Again, that's ossie.hrcovid@dc.gov, and we'll be sure to share that in a follow-up note and in the OSSIE Wire later on as well.
I also just dropped that into the chat, Hansul, for folks.
Perfect.
ossie.hrcovid@dc.gov. Okay, and our next question, which we got from quite a few folks, will staff have more telework options once we do return to in-person?
Yeah, I appreciate this question. As I mentioned, we saw lots of comments and questions about this on the staff survey as well. I'm thrilled to see that people are, that the telework, fully telework operation has been working so well for folks since March, and that people are so eager to continue it. As I said, right now we are continuing in our telework posture for phases 2 and 3. Again, we absolutely see how well it's been received by our team, and so it's something we will continue to consider and explore for the future. But right now, what we know is that we will remain in this remote telework posture for phases 2 and 3.
Okay, and another question that we got from quite a few people, are there any staffers going into the office currently?
Yeah, it's a great question. As I mentioned, I'm here today. You can see our beautiful backdrop in our conference room on the 3rd floor. And I've come in a couple of times. I came in when we had our budget hearing with the council, our virtual budget hearing. And I think for one of our very first all hands, right when we first went to the remote posture. So I've come in a couple of times, and there are other folks who are coming into the office for some specific work. So things like receiving and sorting and distributing mail, for example. For some folks from our incredible CIO team who've kept us all connected and running during this time, have been coming in to image computers and technology and to take care of some of those tech needs. Shout out to Julian Lytle, who's been incredible in helping us get set up for today, and many other things on behalf of all of us. And then also folks who are receiving shipments and setting building policy. So, and I should also shout out here Jason Kim and Alicia Denmark, who've been doing an incredible job, as well as some other folks who've been coming in to help some of these essential in-person operations happen. So we are definitely doing our best to limit access to the building, and the building also has some specific procedures in place. So anyone who needs to report does have to be added to a building list and approved for entry. And so if anyone, so we have some folks who have been on that list who've been coming in, like I said, for these limited specific in-person needs. And so, and we have safety protocols in place for everybody, including mask use, time limits, etc. And so if anyone else has a need to come into the office, please reach out first to your manager and your assistant superintendent, and then they will work with Jason and Alicia to review the request and grant in-person access if that makes sense. So if you do have questions, please reach out to your manager and your assistant superintendent. Just as a note, we are trying to really keep the access limited because we have not fully set up all of our procedures yet. So we're really trying to limit it to just the folks who really need to be here for a limited time. But if you do have that need, please feel free to reach out to your manager and your assistant superintendent. Lita, before we go to the next question, I also just want to share that the mayor's press conference actually coincided with this all hands meeting, and she actually has shared an update on the DCPS school schedule. So I want to go ahead and share that with you all. The mayor just announced that there will be an all virtual start to the school year through the first term, which ends on November 6th. So DCPS will be joining a number of our neighboring jurisdictions in starting in an all virtual posture. We will certainly be in close touch with them and all of our school partners around how we can support and try and ensure that that virtual learning is as effective as possible. But I wanted to share that scheduling update. I'll also note that charter LEAs, some of them have already announced their schedules, others have been coordinating with DCPS around this announcement, but I expect those announcements to come soon as well. So each individual charter LEA is determining their own schedule. DCPS will start in an all virtual posture through the first term, which is November 6th.
Great, thank you, Hansul. And so now we'll take some questions from inside the chat. So our first question, I'm going to publish now. A lot has changed since the staff survey was taken in May. Are there plans to survey staff again in order to more accurately understand how staff can be supported during this extended remote work time and balancing COVID?
I think this is a great question. It is true that time is very hard to track on these days, and a lot has changed since May. I actually had to go back and refresh for myself when the staff survey had taken place this year, because everything does blur together. So I think it's a great point, and something we'll take into consideration. Of course, the staff survey is not the only means we have of understanding where teams are. We're staying in close touch in many ways, but I think that's a really good question and something we'll keep in mind, especially, it would likely be a shorter version, but if that's something we would consider into the future. So thank you for the really good question and suggestion.
On this next question, we have a lot of staff who've been having some issues logging into this meeting. Is there a way that this can be recorded? So I can go ahead and answer that. We are going to make sure that there is a link that goes out afterwards with some follow-up information. We're getting quite a few emails from folks, and we had learned from Octo that there were some changes to Teams. So we will make sure that folks get the link so that they can view this afterwards.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that folks have had trouble logging in. Technology is hard, but we will continue to work on trying to make this meeting as accessible as possible. And Lita, I think just to confirm for folks, I think what you're saying is that we have been recording, and so we will be able to send out that recording afterwards. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So they're always available to watch afterwards. So we'll send out the link and be sure that people get directions on exactly how to watch it.
Great. And for anyone who's watching this later as a recording, I'm so sorry that you weren't able to join us live, but we will keep working on the technology, and glad that you're able to view this later.
So the next question that we have is from Regina. The mayor has not mentioned about special needs students when she mentioned school opening up. What will we be doing to help special needs students?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and as you all probably know, the the focus on our students with disabilities has been something that has been top of mind for OSSE for quite a while, and was specifically called out in our 2019 to 2023 strategic plan as one of our key strategic pillars, given how much we know that more we need to do to better serve our students with disabilities. So I'll say a few things here, but I think, Lita, if we can also just drop a link in the chat to our coronavirus guidance page on our website, I think that would also be helpful for folks to see that we have been issuing a number of different guidance documents and FAQs and resources specifically around this area because it is so top of mind for us. So I'll say a few things, which include one of the things we are focused on and have been from the beginning is even earlier in the summer when we weren't sure sort of how schools were going to be operating, what we knew was whether it was remote or whether it was in person or if it was a hybrid, a mix, the most important thing for all of our students, including our students with disabilities, was to make sure that our schools had a clear plan about how they were going to serve them, make sure that their learning needs and their other related service needs were being met. And so some of you might remember in our last all hands meeting, we spoke about some work that we've carried out at OSSE around our guiding principles for continuous education. With continuous education meaning, whether we start in all virtual as we now are, and if we move to in person at some point during the school year, or if we have a hybrid, how we ensure that no matter what setting our students are in, that their learning is able to take place and their needs are being met. And one specific section of those guiding principles is specifically related to students with disabilities and other students who may have specialized needs, including our English learners. And so we are specifically requiring that our LEAs tell us, how are you making sure your students' needs are met? How are you ensuring that instructional delivery and related service delivery are taking place? Those plans from each LEA are due back to us next week or so, and we will be reviewing those plans closely and giving feedback to our LEAs as needed around how they can do this work. And then on our guidance page that we are, I think, going to drop a link to in the chat, you can see a lot of policy guidance and practice guidance that we've been issuing around how to best do this work for our students with disabilities. Specific policy requirements that we've had to put in place given how different school looks right now, as well as practical guidance around how folks can better be serving our students. The last thing I will share is that in addition to our school-age students with disabilities, we at OSSE, of course, have our Strong Start early intervention program where we are serving our infants and toddlers with developmental delays. When we first moved to a remote posture, our Strong Start team had to pause on operations because normally this is an in-person function. It's with our very young children, and it includes physical therapy or occupational therapy services or other types of intervention services that are typically conducted in person. So initially, and often actually conducted in the family's home. So it was the kind of operation we had to pause when we first went to remote posture in March. But our incredible Part C Strong Start team very quickly moved to say, time is so important for our young children with developmental delays. The whole purpose of early intervention is to try and intervene early on to help a child be able to address that developmental delay and be able to develop in a way that is more in line with their peers of the same age. And so and try and by early intervention try and ensure that the future is much more open to them because the early interventions can make such a difference. And so our Strong Start team, knowing just how precious that time can be, moved really quickly to set up telehealth options for our families around early intervention and worked through many policy and legal and financial and Medicaid related questions to stand that work up. So big shout out to our Strong Start team. And so since the beginning of April, our team has been delivering and working with our partners to deliver telehealth services to our families of young children with developmental delays. And they've seen really strong uptake from our families, which has been exciting. The services are offered either on video with a screen like this, or can also be offered via audio only for families who need that option. And we've seen really good success from that. that. And we also are planning to share some of the practices from that with our local education agencies, as they and our schools are having to think about how to ensure that our older children and older students also have access to those related services, to the kinds of physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy needs that they may have, and how they can learn from that telehealth experience of our Strong Start team. That was a long answer, but hopefully that gives just a little bit of a snapshot, and I encourage folks to go and take a look at the policy documents and the resources that are on our website as well. Actually, one last note on this. One other key need here is just, we know how important family partnerships are around all of our students, but especially our students with disabilities. And so we are actually working to launch by late next month some family resources specifically to help our parents and family members know how they can get information about how to best serve their student during this challenging time. So we're really excited to launch that work as well, and huge thanks to everybody who's been involved with that effort too.
Thanks, Hansul, and that link to those guidance documents is in the chat. Next question, even when staff return to work, how will managers have the discretion to support staff members that may not be able to return due to school schedules, caregiving responsibilities, or vulnerable status? And how will OSSI assist staff in safe passage to work? Will there be expanded parking available for staff that may want to drive that previously took public transit?
Yeah, these are all really good questions, and as I said, we don't have answers to everything yet, but exactly the questions that were just listed out and many others like it are top of mind for us as our agency reopening team works on more detailed plans that are agency specific for our needs. So again, that agency reopening team is made up intentionally of representatives from different divisions that have different locations outside of 1050, as well as our HR team, very importantly, and our building, our facilities and operations team. And so exactly the questions that you asked are among the things that we are working on. What I will note just on the individual circumstances of caring for family members and so on is that certainly we will provide guidance to managers as well as look at anything that we need to set as an agency-wide policy. But if folks have questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to that ossi.hrcovid email address that we mentioned earlier today. And as I said, my commitment to you all is, I know it can be hard when so much else is uncertain to hear that we don't have answers yet, but my commitment to you is that we will continue to communicate really transparently with you all through these all hands meetings, as well as through email and other communications, and that we absolutely hear those questions. We know how important they are, and we will continue to work on them and look for ways that we can meet everyone's individual needs, as well as the work that we do together. So more to come.
The next question, will staff still receive pay in these two phases?
Yes, so we have, of course, been continuing our payments without our compensation payments without interruption to all of our staff. So most of our staff have been working fully just in a remote posture through telework. In some other cases, we've had to modify operations. So for example, our terminal staff, as I mentioned, some of our terminal staff have been involved in emergency relief efforts across the city, food distribution and other efforts like that. Other staff have been remotely teleworking also on the DOT side, and other staff, just the nature of their work has not allowed for remote telework, but we've continued compensation to all of our staff and will continue to do that while we remain in this posture.
And if DC remains in virtual mode, but the non-public schools decide to open or go into hybrid, have a hybrid model, will DOT transport those students?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So what we have done up until now, prior to the pandemic, our operating status when there were school closures, for example, and when there was a snow day, for example, was that our terminals would follow DCPS's operating status. And we did the same thing this spring. And so because DCPS was not having in-person school, we were not transporting students to any school. For this fall, we knew that this was a possibility, and now it's come about where DCPS will be fully virtual through November 6th. Some of our non-public schools may be also virtual, but others may be operating in person. And so this is a question we will be evaluating closely, of course, in partnership with our DOT team and other key partners, including the Division of K-12 Systems and Supports and the Office of General Counsel. There are some specific considerations we have to weigh, but it is something we are looking at closely. So I don't think a final decision has been made yet, but that question was actively on our minds pending this decision. And now that the mayor has made this announcement, it's something we'll be looking at closely and trying to make a decision on soon.
Okay, and for employees going into clients' homes, would OSSI provide us with the things like disposable scrubs or body suits, or is OSSI going to look at a different way we provide services in home?
It's a really good question. I think that, as I said, one of the reasons why our agency reopening team includes representatives from different divisions is so that we can consider the specialized needs of different functions. So there may be different PPE requirements or different protective requirements for being in an office setting with social distancing in place and so on versus as you said, if there is a need to go into a person's home. I think what I can share with you is that we will certainly consider those specialized circumstances and additional protections that may be needed. I mentioned that for our DOT team, we had to advance this work in particular because we needed to prepare in case the school year did start with in-person operations. And so our DOT team has worked closely with citywide procurements around PPE as well as with our operations division, and we're able to articulate the needs for this staff and why we needed a different level of protective equipment than others may in different settings. And so as I noted, for our DOT team, we were able to procure large amounts of not only face masks, but also face shields and gloves. So similarly, I think we will look at each individual work situation and consider either modifications that are needed to that work situation or additional protective equipment that may be needed, or both. So we will continue to be in touch with teams as we sort through that. And I think this is another reason why we want to be sure to why we are working on an agency-specific reopening guide that is really tailored to the different functions and operations within OSSI. And again, we'll be sharing that guide with you all when it is final.
And will the children have to wear masks as well on the school buses?
This is a really good question, and our Division of Health and Wellness has been working really closely with DC Health as well as with our schools and our child care centers around very detailed health and safety guidance to protect everybody involved. You can also see that guidance on the same coronavirus guidance page that I mentioned before, and that was linked in the chat. That includes our guidance across all different kinds of topic areas. So in the health and safety guidance, what we say, and you all saw the mayor's order as well, is that masks are required for children as long as they are above the age of 2, but also as developmentally appropriate. And we get into more details in that guidance about what we mean by that. So for example, for young children who are napping, they would not wear a mask. For anyone who may have trouble breathing, I believe that's an exception as well. And so the answer is yes, we would want children to wear masks as long as it was developmentally appropriate and as long as they could do so safely. So for example, if a child is not able to keep a mask on without touching it a lot, then I think makes the mask much less effective. And so I believe our guidance speaks to some of those different scenarios and considerations. But if a student is able to, especially an older student, then yes, masks would be required for them as well.
Okay, and the next question, with the extended telework, will we be allowed to pick up our additional equipment like docking stations and extra monitors?
Yeah, this is a really good question that we've gotten before as well, and I appreciate you raising it again. At this time, we are not able to allow equipment to leave the building outside of cell phones and of course laptops. There's a number of different reasons for that, including that a lot of our equipment actually is not built to be taken home. The kinds of arms that are available anchor specifically to our desks within the office, and some other parameters and so on. And so we are not able to allow that right now, but we will continue to consider sort of how to best meet people's needs, and we will, if that changes, we will be sure to include it in an agency-wide communication. I would note that there are some specific technology purchase programs with employee discounts. We've shared that information before in the OSSI Wire and in notes from the talent director, but we will be sure to we can be sure to share that information again. I believe it's on a DCHR benefits page, but we can be sure to share that in a follow-up note or in the next OSSI Wire.
Okay, and sort of a similar question, if we remain in telework much longer, is there any consideration for a technology stipend, portable internet sticks, or reimbursement for home printer, ink, or additional home monitors? That's a question we got last time and a few times this time.
Yeah, it's a great question. We don't have that kind of program right now. We do have the discount program that I just mentioned, and so I would encourage people to take a look at that, but we don't have a stipend program or anything like that at this time. As you all probably know, the city is in a really tough revenue climate right now and budget climate. The revenues for FY20 were at something on the order of $600 million less than expected. And so, as you all know, we had gone through our regular budget process, had an approved budget for FY20, and we're actually, almost halfway through the fiscal year when this all started. And so the city was in a moment of having to actually implement a hiring freeze and a spending freeze on any non-essential spending, because we had to find a way to cut $600 million out of the current year's fiscal budget. We also had to scramble because the FY21 budget also was expecting $600 to $700 million less in revenue. And so we went through a new formulation process, a new hearing. The council just passed that budget recently, and the revenue picture is expected to be down significantly into the foreseeable future. We're actually expecting a new revenue estimate from the chief financial officer next month. All of that by way of saying that's sort of the macro picture, and that means that it's very challenging for the district to take on any additional spending for new programs like individual technology spending for employees. I will say, although I can appreciate that is challenging and can be challenging for all of us, I will also note that I have felt really lucky to be in a place that has really tried to prioritize and extend to hold the line, even though the city is having to deal with much reduced revenue and it is having to spend a lot on additional emergency efforts that are deeply important, like contact tracing, like testing, coronavirus testing at locations around the city free of charge, and many other critically important emergency steps, that the city has also maintained investment in education, that we've been able to maintain investment in childcare level funded into next fiscal year. We've extended childcare subsidy payments to our providers because we know how important they are to our community, even when they've been closed. And so while we're not able to spend money on everything that we would want, I am really proud to be in a place where the city is trying to prioritize investments to our community where it's most needed. Lita, I think we can take one more question if there is one, and then I have some closing thoughts I wanted to share too.
Yep. We got the last question then that we also got last time. While the pay will continue, will we receive annual increase or COLA?
Yeah, so I'm going to encourage folks to reach out to our HR team for specific questions because the individual circumstances may differ. But what I can share is, given that overall budget picture that I described, there will not be future COLA increases in FY21 and beyond. For FY20, there are some different circumstances, so I'll encourage folks who have individual questions to reach out to our HR team. But for FY21 and beyond, for now, the COLAs are frozen, just given that overall city budget picture. And again, I just want to acknowledge, I know this is challenging. At the same time, I really appreciate that we've been able to, as much as we can, continue our work here. There are unfortunately many other states and jurisdictions and cities that have been going through large scale furloughs and even more dire budget circumstances. We were very lucky to be in a place where we had built up a lot of reserves as a city, and the city is really trying to make judicious use of those reserves now to try and meet our overall community needs during this. I know we hear this phrase all the time, but it really is such an unprecedented time that I certainly did not ever see coming, and we're all trying to work really hard to balance and meet the needs of all the people we serve during this time, and also try and take care of ourselves. And I know that that is a lot to balance. So I do, the screen says it, but I wanted to say to you all just a huge thank you to all of you for everything that you are doing. It's been really remarkable to see how we have continued our work and been able to even see more directly in many ways the impact of our work on students, families, educators, schools, childcare facilities, and our community as a whole. So just a huge thank you to all of you. In our last couple of minutes, I also just wanted to say to all of you that I want to take a minute just to acknowledge that I know in the last few weeks we've seen the passing of two incredible leaders in our community, two civil rights icons, Reverend C.T. Vivian and also Representative John Lewis. And the reason I wanted to share that is, I think when we see the lives of these incredible men and honor their memory at this time of their passing, it's something, of course, that we are sad to see such incredible figures at this point, but also where we can be inspired by the legacy of the work that they have done and just their incredible commitment over the course of their lifetimes. I was reading about Reverend Vivian and how he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is one of the highest honors our country confers on any civilian. And in 2013, when President Obama placed the Presidential Medal of Freedom and conferred it on him, President Obama said, "The preacher and the civil rights icon pushed America closer to our founding ideals." And he said when the president heard of his passing, the president said, "Vivian shrunk the gap between reality and our constitutional ideals of equality and freedom. He helped move us closer to those ideals in our lives." And then when I think of Representative John Lewis, I think not only of the incredible work that he did, the incredible dedication throughout his life, but in particular how much time he devoted to helping raise up and encourage the voices and the leadership of our young people in a really special way. I saw an article about a visit that he made a few years ago to visit a number of our incarcerated youth from DC. And he spoke to those young men about how he himself had experienced being behind bars many times as he was arrested throughout the civil rights movement. And he talked to them about the hope that he felt, the hope that he felt for them and the leadership he saw in them. And they spoke about just what it meant to them to have this incredible leader come and visit with them, sit with them in their incarcerated facility, and to tell them the hope that he felt from seeing them, even in those circumstances, seeing what the future could hold for them. So I just want to say that I've been inspired by both of these men's legacy and their work, and I hope that their example helps us all to feel a renewed sense of commitment and optimism as we continue to serve our students and families and play our part in trying to bring about a better and more just world. You all are doing that each and every day, and I hope we all continue to do that together as a team. So thank you all so much. We will look forward to, again, to continuing these all hands meetings on a monthly basis. I appreciate everything that you all are doing. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you next month and be in touch in the meantime. Thank you all.